Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com is here. He was live for our draft party last Thursday. What a great event. So many people came out, said hello, got a chance to meet the crew, got a chance to see Andrew DiCecco. He was live in person. And Andrew, we went through all the scenarios, all the possibilities. Well, we now know the answers to the test. Let's break them down with Andrew DiCecco, who did a great job at our draft party last week. And he joins us now for another edition of Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. What's going on, man?
Mike Gill, what's happening, man?
It was great to have you out there last week. We went through all the different scenarios. We broke them all down. When push came to shove, they didn't pick at 10. They went to number 9. They got Jalen Carter. So your initial reaction when that trade was made and the card was turned in with Jalen Carter on the board?
Well, time and time again, you and I have spoken about the likelihood of the Eagles pouncing on Jalen Carter should they be in striking distance. I thought 7 or 8 would have been, enough to, for the Eagles to be aggressive. But obviously, at 9, moving up one spot just to secure his services, you're getting the best player in the draft, at least on my board. I think that he's just a player that you plug him right in from day one, and he not only affects your defensive line and the pressure and open things up for guys like a Josh Sweat, but he also creates opportunities for all 3 levels to be productive. So I think that it was a move that you're getting a face of your defense for the foreseeable future, but it also impacts all 3 levels. So I thought it was a fantastic move to ensure that you brought him in and secured his services.
Give me your thoughts on where he fits in initially. I mean, someone's got to take those Hargrave snaps. Does he get a bulk of the snaps? Is he more of a rotational player? Where do you see Jalen Carter fitting in and helping out in season 1?
Yeah, well, they don't have any defensive linemen currently, I should say defensive tackles, that are equipped to fill the void of a Javon Hargrave outside of Jalen Carter. So I think that he steps in right away. Like I said before, there's very few blemishes to his game. I think he's very pro-ready. So I think that you're going to see him step in and occupy those vacant snaps and provide some pass rush, push the pocket, and really create some disruption there. So I think that he's going to be an early impact type of player. And I can't say enough about how well he's going to fit in with everyone else that they already have there and be such a force in the interior.
It's funny. When we left the show the other day on Thursday, I said I think they'll either trade up to get Carter or stay at 10 and take Nolan Smith. Well, they didn't stay at 10. They got Carter, and somehow they still got Nolan Smith. How surprised were you that Smith was there?
Well, I named Smith at 10 as my pick as well. I thought that I didn't think that they were going to stand pat, but for the sake of, you don't like throwing just trades out there that may never materialize. So for the sake of our exercise, I said Nolan Smith at 10, but getting him at 30 is tremendous value. I don't even need to emphasize that as much because it's just been, just to see a player who many had in the top 10, top 15, certainly, to fall at 30. And he has a clear, clean bill of health. There's nothing to worry about there from the pec injury. Howie Roseman answered those questions on draft night. So I think what it came down to was maybe you see teams that weren't necessarily comfortable with his size and they didn't know where he fit. Is he a tweener? Where do you put him? He's not a fit for everyone's system. But I think right there at 30, it's hard to find a better value. I think that actually might be my favorite pick of the weekend for the Eagles.
Okay, Andrew, break it down for us then. Nolan Smith, how does he fit into the 2023 Eagles defense? Is he a bit player, rotational player? Do you think he has a big impact?
I think he's going to be a prominent rotational player. Now, whether that materializes right away or not, that remains to be determined. I don't think that he will step in right away. He has the luxury of learning behind someone like a Hassan Reddick, who I think that he has a skill set that really mirrors to a fault, and I think that you're going to get somebody that comes off the edge with explosiveness. He's a very quick closer. He's an explosive player, but the Eagles have the luxury of not having to throw him to the wolves, so to speak, right away because they have so many other guys that he can learn from. But you think he'll be a situational pass rusher in the early going, and then you'll see his snap count sort of increase throughout the season. And one thing that we've talked about in your show, and I think that it needs to be mentioned once again, is that I wouldn't be too concerned about his size. He was at 238 at the combine, I believe, but and that might lead one to suggest that he's not a proficient run stopper, or he can be sort of washed down in the running game, and that's just not the case. He was actually very physical at the point of attack, and I thought that his run defense really stood out to me on tape when I was evaluating him throughout the pre-draft process.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, Football 4 from InsideTheBirds.com. Obviously they make those two picks, and then, they need some help on the offensive line. I'm interested to get your take on Tyler Steen, the guard, in round 3. They get him at number 65 overall. I don't know. This is a spot where you ask someone like you, hey, 65, they get Steen. Was there somebody else available that maybe you – because I think in the first round you're okay with Smith and Carter. I don't think – when Smith was on the board – let's go back to that real quick. When Smith was on the board at 30 – there were a lot of intriguing guys, but I think Smith stood out. Like, if they would have ended up taking somebody else in that 30 spot, because so many intriguing prospects fell to 30. But at 65, was there somebody there that you would have preferred over Tyler Steen, or do you like this pick?
I mean, maybe a linebacker, a Trenton Simpson, and Dayon Henley, who are very athletic, and they can really step in and provide a competent 1-2 punch with Nakobe Dean, but really hard to argue with anything they did on draft weekend, Mike. I mean, Tyler Steen, we know that they value the offensive line. You would be hard pressed to sort of, recall an instance over the past number of years where they really go past round 3 without addressing it. And when you get Tyler Steen, you're getting somebody that played at Vanderbilt for 3 years, and he played at Alabama last year, left tackle. That's not going to be his position at the next level. At least from my vantage point, I think that he's going to slide in as a guard, could challenge Cam Jurgens in camp. Obviously, Nick Sirianni alluded to the best player will play, so that would seem to lean towards a camp competition. And I think that Tyler Steen can actually win that. And he has really short arms despite being 6'6", so he has kind of a unusual build. But I also think that he will, if Josh Stoutland gives you the seal of approval, you're going to be an Eagle, and they're going to mold him into the player that they believe that he can be, and I think he can be a day one starter.
Yeah, real quick, go back to 30, Nolan Smith. Joey Porter was available. You could have got Steve Avila. I know you liked him. Tipperman, the center from Wisconsin. Brian Branch, the safety from Alabama, was available. Would you have preferred any of those guys at 30, or were you okay with them taking Nolan Smith?
Well, I think when you look at the positional value of pass rusher and knowing that the Eagles, in all likelihood, would have felt comfortable taking Nolan Smith at 10, the value was there. And I think that they did. They made the right move, and we can always go back. Hindsight is one of those things throughout the draft that you find yourself doing frequently. But I think on draft night, given the circumstances, that was the right pick.
All right, right behind them, 65 is Steen, 66, Sidney Brown, Illinois. Give us a little thoughts on Brown and how he real quick on Steen. Jurgens, Steen, Driscoll, Suopeta, who wins that right guard spot in your mind?
I'm going to say Tyler Steen.
It's Tyler Steen. All right, so he'll be the right guard. Jurgens will be the backup center. Driscoll will remain the swing guy. Opeta will be on the left side backup. All right, Sidney Brown, thoughts on him and how he fits into this defense?
I had a round 2 grade on Sidney Brown, and I think that he is just a compactly built physical player, sort of like a heat-seeking missile. He has multiple alignment versatility, and I just think that he does a lot of things well. He has tremendous leadership. Really stood out on tape, 10 interceptions at Illinois, and his head coach at Illinois compared to Bob Sanders. Obviously, that's very high praise. Bob Sanders is one of my all-time favorite players. I grew up watching him play. But if he can be anywhere close to a Bob Sanders, the Eagles got fantastic value where they got him, and I think that he will be a starter opposite Terrell Edmonds come week 1. I think that he's someone that's going to pick up the system pretty quickly. He has a very high football IQ. That's one of his prominent traits. So I think that he's somebody that can be a plug-and-play guy for the Eagles.
All right, there's something there. You think he'll be the starting guy next to Edmonds. So that's a definite something to keep an eye on at training camp. Let's go further down to 4th-round pick 105, another Georgia guy. That was kind of a theme of the weekend, obviously. Kelee Ringo. He is a very intriguing prospect, and obviously the Eagles, we've talked about it a lot. They got 2 starting corners on the outside. They've got Maddox on the inside. But if one of those guys gets hurt, there's a whole heck of a lot up in the airness. What about Ringo and his fit for Philly?
Yeah, going into day 3, I'm like, man, the Eagles are knocking it out of the park. But if they can somehow come away with an outside corner and trade up and find a way to secure one, that would be great. And that would really leave them with very few deficiencies on the roster, because right now you're relying on, before that, they were relying on Greedy Williams and Zach McPherson to step in should Slayer or Bradbury miss some time. But, man, when they traded up on, I guess it was Saturday morning, the first player on my mind was, I was like, they're going to get Ringo. And sure enough, they checked off the box at outside corner. They added another Georgia player, really lengthy guy, 6'2", 205. Fluid. He's fluid to an extent. I mean, I think he's better. His linear speed is more something that stands out. He's not exactly as fluid moving laterally. I think he's a bit stiff. I think sometimes he can be a little bit grabby and more and too physical. But, I mean, he's 20 years old. We're talking about a 20-year-old kid that's going to have a chance to learn behind Slay and Bradbury and won't be thrown into the wolves. We mentioned Nolan Smith, but Ringo's another player that can sort of be gradually implemented into the defense, play some special teams, and then maybe in 2 years, so I say maybe because you don't know how long Slay or Bradbury are really going to be able to play out their contract, but I think that Ringo will be a starter there. He also could potentially play some safety for you as well, and we know how much the Eagles value versatility in general, but certainly among the defensive backs.
Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, looking back at the Eagles draft class and how they kind of fit in here. Let's go to round 6. This is an interesting one because they went quarterback here and took Tanner McKee. It seems like a guy who really doesn't fit this offense all that much.
Well, one would think, but I think if you look at it from another angle, it gives the Eagles some diversification from their quarterback room, because you have two mobile guys in Jalen Hurts and Marcus Mariota, and you have sort of a pocket passer there in McKee. And Ian Book, who I forgot to mention, is also somebody that's a little bit he can run a little bit. So they have three athletic guys, and then you have the one outlier there, which is McKee, and he's a prototypical pocket passer. He's 6'6", 230, has a very strong arm, throws a lot of velocity, isn't afraid to put the ball in tight windows, trusts his receivers a lot. Now, he's a statue in the pocket, and I think that sometimes he doesn't throw with much touch, and I think that his accuracy isn't quite where it needs to be. I believe he threw 62% of his passes, I think he completed last season, if I'm not mistaken. But when you watch him on tape, there's some issues with accuracy from my perspective. So I think that there's some things that you really like, which is when you're in the 6th round, 7th round, you're swinging the bat and you're getting guys with certain tools that you can work with and hoping that you can really find a way to maximize what they're able to do. And I think that I know he's a better quarterback right now than Ian Book. Now, Ian Book has the advantage because he already has a year in the system. So that'll be an interesting camp battle to watch, because I do think McKee has some moldable traits that are worth developing.
All right, way down at pick 249, Moro Ojomo, Texas. This is a kid that I like a lot. I mean, I know it's the 7th round, but he was a snap player at Texas. A little small, though. I think it might be the problem for him. But he's an interesting prospect for me. What did you think about Ojomo? Is he a guy that has a shot here, or a long shot?
Aside from the DeAndre Swift trade, this was my favorite move that the Eagles made on day 3. I had a 5th-round grade on Ojomo, and he is sort of a tweener. I think last year he played at 285. He weighed in at 292 at the Combine. Maybe teams didn't really know where he fit or what his long-term potential was going to be, but immensely long arms, powerful player, play strength is something that really stands out on tape. I think that he could be, he does offer versatile scheme versatility, positional alignment versatility. Now, the Eagles have an embarrassment of riches on the defensive line, so I don't know where he's going to ultimately fit. He's going to be competing with someone like a Marlon Tuipulotu and a Kentavious Street for a roster spot. But that's how loaded right now the Eagles are, because Ojomo, like I said, I had a 5th-round grade on him. I was very surprised that he was even there in the 7th round. So I think that if he's able to stand out enough in camp, you may not want to expose him to waivers, because he may be, you hear this every summer, there's no way they can cut player X because they're not going to clear waivers. Well, he would be a player that if he does show something, that would be one that you would worry about clearing waivers.
Yeah, you and I agree on that one. I like him a lot. I of course, watch a lot of Big 12 stuff because of West Virginia, and I liked him at Texas. He was a pretty explosive player. I think you're right, a little undersized maybe for consistent inside play. You mentioned that you kind of played your cards a little for those of you who were listening out there and heard them, but your favorite move of the weekend, it sounded like, was DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, I mean, to talk about a home run that put a bow on a stellar draft weekend for the Eagles. And, you're getting a player who I think I mentioned this when I was on with Adam. I've scouted running backs for a number of years, but I think over the past 4 or 5 years, my favorite one was DeAndre Swift. Just a really fun study. A lot of juice, a lot of explosiveness, patient runner. There's not a lot that he doesn't do well, except stay healthy, I guess. I mean, he's missed 10 games in 3 years. But
yes.
You're talking about a player who completely gives the offense a new dimension as a home run hitter, and he can catch the football extremely well, which is something that Miles Sanders wasn't adept at doing. So you're adding a whole new dimension here, and you're taking the offense to another level. I mean, what an ad, and what a home run from Howie Roseman.
All right, couple things. Let's get into that. I've been asking this question a lot. I want to get your take. You mentioned the injuries. If Penny and Swift both make it through all 17 games, who has a bigger impact?
I think DeAndre Swift, only because he gives you dual threat ability. And I think that he has more home run hitting potential. And that's not to say that Penny doesn't, because Penny does have some burst and some juice to his game. But DeAndre Swift is just such an electric player. Putting him in that offense, behind that offensive line, I think that he could have, obviously if you're in a backfield committee, rushing for 1,000 might be a little tough now, but I think 800 yards wouldn't be out of the question.
All right. Now, let me ask you this, because this has been brought up a lot. I agree with you catching the football. This is what Swift excels at. The Eagles, generally, their offense doesn't throw the ball to the backs because Jalen Hurts essentially when he's checking down that many times, he just takes off and runs. Do we think that they're going to incorporate the back catching the football more because of Swift?
Well, I'd also countered your point by saying that they didn't throw it to the running backs because Miles Sanders had a case of the Butterfingers and he wasn't necessarily a reliable option. But now that you have pass-catching options, I think Kenny Gainwell really took a big step forward at the end of last season. You have a couple of options there that I think that will be. And by the way, this is going to be maybe an altered look on offense. We have Brian Johnson calling plays now. So I think that you might see a different look, and you're going to see their running backs being utilized because they all present different skill sets. And I think that when you have two pass-catching guys, particularly talking about DeAndre Swift here, who can really alter your offense and propel it forward, you have to utilize that. And I think they're going to. That's a big part of his game.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, let's get some thoughts on the undrafted rookie free agents. This is another area where you excel. So any names jump off the page at you that our listeners should be keeping an eye on when training camp comes around?
Mekhi Garner, defensive back. He spent some time at Louisiana Lafayette, and he played at LSU last season. He's 6'2". He has a body type that really reminds me of James Bradbury, lengthy player, physical. I just don't know if he's going to be a long-term cornerback or if he's going to eventually be asked, could be as early as this summer, to transition to safety. I think he's very physical, not afraid to stick his nose in there, and his skill set and his temperament and his demeanor and everything like that really translates to me to safety. So he's a player that's played a lot of football, played in different systems, so I think that he's a player to keep an eye on. Joseph Ngata, the wide receiver from Clemson, is someone that I always had really high hopes for when I watched him at Clemson. In fact, there was a 2020 season where I thought that he was my breakout player, and it just never materialized. He struggled with injuries in 2020 and 2021. There's a lot of players there they used they had Amari Rodgers and they had Justin Ross before he got hurt, and he just never got no rhythm and never came together for him. But 5-star recruit out of Folsom, California, and big-bodied guy, 6'3", 217. I think he uses his frame to his advantage in shielding defensive backs. Not a burner. He runs a 4.54, but he's someone that I think can be a 3-level player. But again, when you're talking about the back end of the roster, you have to be able to contribute on special teams. We have to see if he's able to do that. He only has a small sample size and a few months in order to do so, but he's a player that I really liked in college and really intriguing to me because it just never worked out.
What about Eli Ricks? He's an interesting guy. Obviously, a lot of people talking about him. Alabama, LSU was, as a freshman, jumped off. I was laughing because we were talking about these way too early mock drafts, which are already out, by the way. Last year, the way too early mock draft had Eli Ricks going number 10 overall. Well, he didn't make it to number 10, but he went to the team that had the 10th pick. Is he a guy that you have any interest in?
Well, first of all, that goes to my point that there's not a whole lot of there's not a point really to doing these mock drafts a year out, right? I mean, I remember doing one a number of years ago where I had Josh Jobe being a high pick. I like Josh Jobe a lot. I liked him coming out.
Who's on this roster for the people out there?
Right, yeah. I had a 5th round grade coming out of Alabama last year. But to your point, I like Eli Ricks a little bit. He hasn't played a lot of football. I like his length. He's 6'2", 190. I think he played 9 games last year. Always started 5. Struggled with some early season injuries. I'm surprised that he didn't stay at Alabama, because I think that he really could have helped himself by playing some more football. He's sort of a raw prospect, but he's a fluid athlete. You just don't know where he fits. And I've already seen people say that he's a lock to make the roster, XYZ. He hasn't put the pads on yet. He hasn't taken a single snap in training camp. You have to see. And not to mention, he's going to have to contend with the likes of Greedy Williams, Josiah Scott, Zach McPherson, Mario Goodrich. There's a lot of players there that are going to be vying for those final spots. So I think that he might slide in as a practice squad player. But, I mean, he'll be interested to watch in one-on-ones. I want to see how he fares, because he does have a unique body type, very long arms.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, the draft is in the books. Rookie camp starts tomorrow. We'll get a chance to see these guys out there in shorts and T-shirts, maybe helmets, I would imagine. And we'll see it all kind of unfold here. It's the first start of the process to get this team ready for training camp, but the draft is in the books. Just in overall, was there something on draft day other than the Eagles stuff that, I know you love the draft, that was kind of the wowing moment for you?
To start off, I would say Jahmyr Gibbs going 12 to the Lions, when I and many others had him slotted as a late first-round pick. I think Will McDonald going to the Jets there at 15 was something I certainly didn't foresee, with the likes of Nolan Smith on the board and a number of other prospects. Emmanuel Forbes going ahead of Christian Gonzalez was something that really stunned me. I had Christian Gonzalez in my top-rated corner. You just don't know what teams see. It's all in the eye of the beholder, and doesn't necessarily mean that they whiffed or that they reached or anything like that. It's all relative to how their boards are, and the games still have to be played. We'll see how it shakes out.
All right, the draft is in the book. The games will be starting before we know it. And by the way, we'll get the schedule a week from tonight on March 11th is what we're being told, so we'll know where the Eagles are playing and when, and we'll talk more about it with Andrew DiCecco here on the Sports Bash Live. Don't forget, check him out at Andrew DiCecco and over at InsideTheBirds.com. Andrew, take care, bud.
Have a good one, Mike.
All right, there's Andrew DiCecco's breakdown of the Eagles and their draft class. Hopefully you enjoyed the conversation and our draft coverage. Kind of puts a bow on our draft coverage this year.